Good morning. Peace be upon you. Venerable Wuxing, the Most Reverend Robert McGuckin, the members of the Goodwill Committee, dear respectable Dharma Masters and Venerables, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Day 2 of the Peace Education Forum. It is great to see you again. We have a full day of exciting programs ahead. The first program on the agenda is Plenary 3, a presentation by the Most Reverend Robert McGuckin, Bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Toowoomba. The topic for Plenary 3 is inclusive and integration from a religious perspective. The Most Reverend Robert McGuckin was born in Marrickville, New South Wales. After leaving school, he worked in banking for several years before entering the seminary in 1967. He was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Sydney on 20 October 1973 by His Grace Archbishop James Carroll. From 1986, he worked in the Diocese of Parramatta in canon law and ministered in the parish of St Michael's, South Blacktown. He was vicar for religious from 1990 to 2010, diocesan administrator of the Diocese of Parramatta in 1997. Since 1997, he has been Vicar General of the Diocese and moderator of the Diocesan Curia. In 2011, he was named by Pope Benedict XVI a Prelate of Honour of His Holiness. In late 2011, the bishops of the province of Sydney appointed him Judicial Vicar of the Regional Tribunal. On 11 July 2012, he was ordained the Bishop of Toowoomba. Now, with great honour, may I invite the Most Reverend Robert McGuckin to the stage to deliver his presentation.
Well, thank you very much for the welcome. For someone who's grown up in Australia in the post-Second World War era, I myself have witnessed a number of change in many spheres of life. I grew up in Sydney, and I saw a great movement of people there. Apart from people arriving from the UK, from England and Ireland, main group of migrants in the early 50s were really from Italy and from Greece. Later, a migration from Asia and beyond when Australia opened up its borders a little more freely. In the 1950s, I was fortunate in having wonderful Greek neighbours move in next door. And it was something exciting. Their food was different. Their hospitality was something which was just taken as a given. There were 3 brothers there. 2 of them had recently married and had come to Australia with their wives, expecting children, and the 3rd engaged to be married. Today, their spoken English might be fairly poor, and that may be due to the fact that I was the one that taught them English. But they very much became part of my family, and indeed we become very much part of their family too. And I know that we have continued to celebrate festivals and feasts and other occasions for well over 50 years. And they celebrated their festivals with much gusto. whilst in the 1950s and beyond, many white Anglo-Saxon Australians may have felt a little threatened by their, I'd have to say, very hard-working new arrivals who spoke a different language. My own ancestry is Irish, coming to Australia, Northern Irish, I'd say they're the fighting ones in the 1850s, which really was only 100 years before my Greek neighbours arrived. In 2007, the Australian bishops produced a document, Graced by Migration, implementing a national vision in pastoral care for a multicultural Australian church. Whilst it was something for the church, it certainly has many principles which apply throughout the situations that we find ourselves in. And I think the expression graced by migration sums up very well a reality not only limited to the church but indeed to the whole community. We have been so enriched by the diversity, the gifts, the talents of many people who have come to this very fortunate land. New arrivals have been a great blessing to Australia, and there's been much advancement because of their arrival. I suppose with where I came from, migration's been very much something that I had a great interest in from my very early teenage years and beyond. And as a priest, I've been fortunate to minister in very much multicultural area. I was at Mascot for many years, and almost 90% of the children in that school came from non-English speaking backgrounds. For a time, with people coming from Latin America, great number of people from Argentina that I used to say Mass in Spanish. Maybe that could be a good plus with the new Pope. I might be able to try my Spanish with him. But it's been, and I've always in my looking at these things have recommended integration as the way forward for all of us. Unfortunately, I think integration is misunderstood, or people put a somewhat different spin on it. And they might say, yes, it's fine for new arrivals to come here, but they should immediately accept everything that is here. And they indeed should ditch everything from their past. That's not integration. Rather, it's merely assimilation with no respect for the new arrivals or any openness on the part of those people who are already here. Integration requires a movement forward, taking on board the good values of those who have come here. And when there is an open meeting between peoples, between new and old, it's possible to have what you might call a new amalgam, a community that is richer and stronger than what was there before. Where, however, there's fear, there's always a great danger that people will become isolated and will go into what sometimes turns out to be ghettos. It's natural enough when people are in strange surroundings for them to gather around people who speak their same language. And if they're not welcomed into the larger community, they can become isolated, and when that happens, we have segregation. Segregation creates its own problems and does nothing to assist the good of the community, the common good. Segregation becomes then a massive barrier to friendship, to growth, and for the good of all of us. Human mobility is not something that's just begun 100 years ago, but it's been a genuinely human existence from the earlier of times. And from a religious perspective, in biblical times, in the Old Testament, we see a great movement of people from one place to another. And even in the New Testament, we see the Holy Family of Joseph, of Mary and Jesus, they themselves were refugees for a time, They lived in exile in Egypt, having escaped the fury of a despot. And our refugees who come to this country in very much mirroring that they are escaping from something like that. And ought we not have an open door situation there? For anyone who has left Australia for a time to live overseas, and I studied postgrad studies overseas, it was an English-speaking country, a lot of French spoken there as well in Canada, but I know how unsettling that can be for people. Even moving from one state to another within Australia isn't always easy. And interesting enough, when I arrived from south to Queensland, beautiful one day, perfect the next, the Maroons in this, I was told, they tried to suggest that I should follow the Maroons in the State of Origin series. My response was, I thought it was State of Origin, not State of Destination. But anyhow, I may well, if they keep playing as they were down south, I might well and truly put on that maroon jumper that they gave me. It's really unreal to suggest that new arrivals give up their language, give up their culture. It's strange that people could even suggest that. Certainly they should be encouraged and given every help to try and learn the language. And that's not easy. I wouldn't particularly like to be trying that at an age when usually our skills of learning new languages is more difficult. We should be encouraging a genuine welcome, understanding, friendship, hospitality. Words are not enough. Words lack conviction unless they flow from an awareness of personal responsibility. And we all dismiss the responsibility that each of us has in this regard. And it's easy to blame others for injustice, but each one can help to build a genuine spirit of fellowship. In 2009, the Australian bishops produced a document, well, more than a document. You could get a hernia carrying this. It's this size. And it says it's a caring for migrants, caring for refugees, a collection of church documents on pastoral care. And it lists there 7 principles from the scripture and church documents. Now, this relates to the church, but similarly, these principles could be what could relate to the whole community. So it talks about principles which need to be accepted by all of us if we are really to move forward in this aspect of welcoming and of, indeed, here we go. So that's the document. It talks about pastoral care, 7 principles. These are some of the principles. It talks about equal distribution of the world's resources. That's not easy to achieve. Most people don't want to give up things to share with others. But there ought to be that equal distribution of the world's resources. People have a right to migration. And in saying that, it needs to be, there needs to be some regulation how that's done orderly. And the regulations ought not be so restrictive that you need a postgraduate degree in something or other, even to fill in the forms which the Australian government, I struggle with those forms from time to time. It's quite massive. Handy having a little thing like this in my hand here. It talks about integration. It allows for celebration of people who come from other lands in their own culture, in their own language. It encourages contact between those born in Australia and those born out of Australia. In saying that, certainly they need time to be able to celebrate on their own, but there ought to be that coming together too quite frequently. And I suppose the church at time to time offers up language masses in particular language, but at the same time tries to involve people in the local parish as well. It's a difficult balance to work with. It's indeed, migrants are a new arrival, an integral part of the local church, an integral part of the local community, and they're not outsiders. What's our stand on this? Do we see them as outsiders, or do we see them as part of the community? Something each of us, it's a principle there that we need to look at. Migrants should have access to all the resources of the local church, this says. You could read to the local community, which are enjoyed by others. In fact, because they've just arrived, their needs may be far greater than those of us who are already here. So they've got a right to resources. And we've got to be careful that we don't make too many obstacles that people can't access such resources. Migrant clergy are part of the local clergy, and they are invited to be involved in gatherings, and they similarly should receive the same remuneration as clergy already here. And I suppose you could translate that to wages perhaps too, and to welcoming people. Integration respects the time frame of the new arrival. It's not something that you can rush. It's all very well to say, fine, okay, we'll give them 6 months to reach an IELTS level of 7.5 or something like that to be able to receive permanent residency within Australia. Or we give them 3 years before they can be, they have to be completely integrated. It will depend a lot on the traumas where people have come from, their ability to work through these things, the support that they receive from the community. So we can't rush these things. People should indeed, language and culture is something which is part of people, and there should be recognition that new circumstances will cause migrants and receiving cultures to evolve. That's that new amalgam I talk about. It's that people, have good values, and they come and they accept good values here, and there's an inculturation thing. We too, similarly, should be prepared to grab hold of and accept many of those values, good values that new arrivals bring. The spirit of hospitality, of welcoming that they themselves have, that we're not closed shop in our attitude towards people. As a canon lawyer, I'm aware that you can't legislate for holiness. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could? I wouldn't have any problems. I'm sure leaders of other church and other faith communities, if you put it down in law, everything's going to be all right. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. Law's meant to enable people to fulfill and get to where they are with little obstacles. I think our driving rules are a part of that. What side of the road did you drive on getting here this morning? On the left side of the road or the right side of the road? We followed a few rules, didn't it? And enables us to get here. And I think that's what law needs to do. We need to create the best circumstances whereby people can exercise the rights that they have. And indeed, in the church, it talks about the good of the person has to be the ultimate thing that we look at. The area of rights is an area that I have dealt with for a number of years. And people these days, I think we live in a very much an individualistic approach to things. It's the me society. My rights, they certainly, are they to outweigh the rights of others? No. Are my rights to be ignored? I don't think so. But in pushing forward your own rights, you also have to respect the rights of the other person as well. And at times you have to look at the common good. And perhaps that's not something that is very popular in this me world, what I want. We are then looking at here some of these rights and obligations. There's certainly church rights and obligations, but similarly Many of these flow from what you might call natural law too. It's not something that I've invented. Sorry if it's not large enough there. I can almost read it down the back. The dignity of each person is to be respected. The person has to have supreme value there. People have the right to make their needs and opinions known. And we're not a totalitarian state here, and people need to be freely to express their needs and their opinions. Wouldn't it be a boring place if we all just sort of almost automatons, that we would just go along and be controlled? Similarly, people have a right to their own form of spiritual life. There's some restrictions and all this within the church. My life would be a misery if there weren't some limitations on what people can and can't do. So we all don't have to do doing things exactly the same way at the same time. And one of the things I struggle with sometimes with different people that might come from this side of the pendulum or that side of the pendulum, but there needs to be charity in all this and some ability to allow people their own spirituality. And people have got a right to form associations. If we are friends with people, we'll know what's going on. Sometimes when there's this fear, there can be that, what are they on about now? But people do have a right to form associations. Both the migrant and the host communities have a duty. It's not just something that they can take or leave, but it's a duty to work for integration, which indeed encourages mutual learning for the enrichment of the local community. I would think these days are very special as we come to look at other faiths, other cultures, and indeed the inculturation thing does require people who are here to really look closely at where people are and where they've come from, have some understanding of what's driving many of these features. This is fairly small print, but it's something that the church is always very strong on, that everyone, including recent arrivals, should recognise the special place of the Aboriginal people and culture in Australia while they learn to live an Australian culture largely determined by a British-European connection. And new arrivals and old alike need also to respect the dignity and the rights of the first inhabitants in the land. This is a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But all these rights and obligations, the principles that are there, it's a process. There are no outsiders in this. We are members of the community. We are here. We be here for 100 years, 1,000 years, or 5 minutes. We are part of the local community. And each of us has his or her part to play in this. So may we begin, or even better still, continue to work together so that we enrich this land and are enriched by each other. Thank you.
We have some time for question and answer, so please feel free to seek for clarification from the Bishop.
Somebody down there. Oh, there's a few people. Yes, for sure. I'm going to go right down the back there.
Mostly, I think integration is fairly easy, but there are some very obvious sticking points which are extremely difficult. One of those being such an instance of female genital mutilation. Now, how do we overcome this kind of problem? Have you answers to this?
Well, there are also civil laws that come into play, and as I said, laws are there for a reason. Laws come about not to just make life difficult for people, and there are laws which apply in this country to those matters. And education is an important issue in all this, and it's all very well for us to say, people come here, they have to know all things, but our laws, similarly, the test of our laws ought to be, what's the purpose of the law, and is there value in this law that we have here? And there is. And it's trying to educate people in that. So that's a process, and there needs to be an understanding that there has to be respect for the laws that are here. I mean, bad law, there is what I might be called non-reception of bad law. But the laws that we have making those things that you speak about prohibited, indeed, need to be stressed, and there's education needed in that regard. I hope that helps. Lady down yonder down here.
Bishop, I was a little bit surprised that you put up that people have a right to migration. I've never assumed that I had the right to migrate to another country unless that country was going to allow me in as part of its society. On what basis do you say that there is a right?
Yeah, there's a natural right for people to indeed advance in themselves. Indeed, people have got no, if they're being oppression, people have certainly got a right to try and correct those things, and sometimes they're unable to do that. So people do have a right to move to other places. I mean, it's not, as I say, all these rights need to be balanced. It's not one right against another, and it's an area. I mean, if you, why will people come here? It's they want a betterment for where they have come from. In many areas, it's a situation where there's been suppression. There's certainly despots and things like that. Starvation. People have got a right to equal distribution of the world's goods. Now, people may not like that and how you bring it about, but it's a right that they have. It's something that, you know, it needs to be balanced a little bit. So there are some sort of limitations on that. But certainly people do have natural rights in that area. Yeah.
Maybe more of a comment than anything else. I lived in New Mexico, West Texas for a long time, and it's gotten now to the place, though I grew up speaking a bit of Tex-Mex, it's gotten to the place that in Southern California, New Mexico, West Texas, along the border, and it's growing north, people will not speak English to you. You can't get a job unless you can speak Spanish. And I think it's very important that we certainly welcome people and they keep their language, but that we insist that anyone who's a citizen is able to speak English, so there is a common language.
There is. It's difficult when you're on a border very close to that, and I've experienced that in California and New Mexico and that, where even the postage there or the signage is in Spanish and in English. And yes, that's an American problem. We've got a lot of water around us, so it tends to... what might you think would be the second language we'd be forced to speak? I don't know.
For instance, a lot of Finnish people settled north of Townsville, and unfortunately, very often in the families, the wives were left not speaking English, and there was a lot of depression because of the Finnish community really being isolated. And I see this as a real problem.
It is. Yes.
You know, I'm all for them speaking, having their Finnish culture and any other culture, but it's good to be part of the society too.
It is. It does sort of welcome people in, you know, if they go shopping and things like that, they know what's going on. But you've got to be careful. I mean, it's harder for older people, but it also, I suppose, not allowing people to learn and give them the opportunities and the means to learn English, it can be, as I say, even within the local community there, they might be trying to just keep them locked in. Thank you. Just maybe the last one. I'm conscious I'm going over time. So.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your speech. I'm a member of the Baha'i Faith, and your talk was very heartwarming. I just have a comment, and I would like to say right now, we think a piece of land is mine, my language, my land, my country. We are very entangled with nationalism and all these things. If we acknowledge that we are one species, human species, and there is only really one land, homeland is the earth. We do not be so prejudiced and so attached to our little land. This can come to my land, this person cannot come to my land. And I appreciated that you said everybody has a natural right of movement. And also I appreciate, of course, we need laws to govern these movements and everything else. But I believe all these issues come from our lack of recognition of the fact that we are one. No matter how we look, where we live, we are from one species, human species, and the whole earth is our home. So naturally, I should be able to go anywhere I want if I obey the laws and I am a good citizen.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Your Grace. Your presentation touches our heart. Your generous heart inspires us. You give us hope and confidence that Toowoomba and Australia, the multicultural, diverse community, has a future for their children. Can we please put our hands together once again? Thank you, Your Grace, for being a candle that gives us light.